The hip-hop writer is a creator, composing understanding words of culture brilliance, powering a rebalance of the elements equally. Pages of rejuvenated reaffirmation, simply the almighty leadership of insightful craftwork that stands to build through any conversation born to be. Yet his duty daily is as a journalist that questions properly and uses his ears to filter the real. And as the art decays by dilution, he concentrates the best, again and again, exposing it in the print. Today's journalist and tomorrow's historian, he listens to share. Here is that necessary attempt, executed again and again and again. This is the Power Right Show on S.STREET Media. This is your brother, the lone low life with the home-sewn garment, the Boricua with the build, the true and living God, stepping in score, Sunya's Allah, a.k.a. Skillustrator Low. And we're on S.STREET Media, the evolution of media, where every intrigue will have its own show, where every incredible thought will have its own episode, and every timeless insight will be archived. And as I always say, this show is about my element of hip-hop, what I like to call the writer of art on art and science on music. The only show in history on this hip-hop writer element that I, a veteran of over a quarter century, helped to pioneer. And man, before we even get into our great guest, let me throw some stuff out there. If you're willing to pay $100 each copy for my own book, The Filtered Real, Essays from the Invisible Renaissance, hit me up at Sunyez for that and lower rates. The first, the only right now, real book about this era of music that we are at now. It is out. Get at me at Sunyez on the Instagram, Sunyez97@gmail.com. You know what I mean? And all of that good stuff. You know what I mean? Definitely want to give out a shout out to Thurston Howe the third, big bro. Got to do his entire bio, a really detailed bio of all of his incredible accomplishments and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And that's on Thurston Howe the third, the 3rd.com. Check that out. Read the bio. Get to know him. Edutain yourself with all that, and the music and the legacy, the music videos, the trials and tribulations. You know what I mean? One of the most engaging individuals in the history of this music. You know what I mean? And we got a special show for you today. I don't even want to talk about other stuff. You know what I mean? You know, recently we were talking off air about this though. If you're a 5%er, if you're part of the 5% Nation of God's Nerds, you recently got to see a video that we've, you know, all of us that weren't with him, never really got to see him physically, you know, moving, in motion. And we got to see an old clip, a newsreel clip of Allah the Father, right? Known to many who, under the name of Clarence 13X, when he left the Nation of Islam, that was what he was known as, but who he was and is Allah the Father. And he founded our 5% Nation of Islam, where we teach that the original man is a true and living God, where we teach that the original woman is a true and living earth, and who we teach you is, what we also teach you is who is original, right? Since we're using that word. And the prerequisite being that there's no mystery God, regardless to who or what you are. You know what I mean? But we got to see a video of Allah the Father, and it was wonderful in the mortality of it. You know, because we know of so much immortal things that he's done, though, to see that he's like just like us. You know what I'm saying? It was a beautiful thing. And a lot of people always talk about in this digital world, how do you get the knowledge of self? Like, you really get knowledge of self. Everybody knows that when I document it, knowledge of self means, it don't mean that you're spiritual. It don't mean that you wear more mala beads than normal. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean that you know how to use the crystals. You know what I mean? I'll give it to you. You might know how to use the crystals. You know what I mean? Some people don't know. Some people know how. I guess you know how to use them. You know what I mean? but it means that you know that there's no mystery God, and that you know that you're the true and living God, or that you know that you're a righteous man or woman. You know what I mean? And if you can't make it to one of the schools, if you can't find a person that knows this knowledge, one of the best ways is to find literature And in all my years teaching at a law school in Mecca, um, teaching the longest at a law school in Mecca, an actual class, the Peace Course, Political Education and Civilization Enrichment for over 20 years. I had the honor to work on these books, and they honestly, I feel, are the best books for anyone that wants to know more about this nation, to get a complete look at them. And there's other good ones. Knowledge Itself, Anthology, which I had a part in, a lot of Jihad's work. But if you want one author, one really basic run through, The Righteous Way by Star Mel Allah is incredible. And now that over the years, he's made 3 of them, and he's now out with the final one out of the trilogy. This shoots Star Wars out the box. The Infinity Edition, an incredible book, an incredible read. And honestly, it's going to be one book I visit and reread at least every 2 years. You know what I'm saying? And write notes on and write details on. And it's my honor to have one of the great, not just 5%ers, but one of the great authors I've met in my lifetime. Star Mel Allah is here. Peace to God.
Peace. All right?
Indeed, God, indeed. You know, they know we have the Righteous Way books, the 3 Righteous Way books. You know, they know they're authored. And a lot of times people wonder, you know, like, how come there aren't more books about the nation? And they think that, you know, anybody that just visited the school can write something. And there's a lot of crap books out there, people that visited and said some malicious things. You know, you can't quote me and then make a good book. You know what I mean? It's not gonna work. You know what I mean? You can hear a story from Azrael and then think you know everything about what happened with white folks in the nation,
right?
You know, and misinterpret that, you know, and get your beliefs about it. You're not gonna do well if you're a Muslim of any sort, and then, you know, see us for 10 minutes and then think you got all the juice. Not gonna work. You need someone that's really in this nation. That's so right. Star Mel, I want to, you know, give you a chance and really educate everybody about this incredible history, because I find your life story intriguing. So I want to start at the origins of Star Mel. You know, who was he as a young kid? How did he, you know, get the knowledge of self? Why was it important when you were young? You know, all those things, the life story.
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean, you know, this, with me, that question takes me back to the mid-90s, right? And if anybody, you know, remembers the mid-90s, I know there's a lot of younger people out there, but the 90s was an interesting time. I mean, especially if, you know, you were outside often. And so, you know, we're talking, I was 15 years old, you know, and I spent most of my time outside the house. And so in doing that, you know, you meet a lot of different people, you know, but interestingly, among those people, you'll have 1 or 2 people who have knowledge of self. And you don't know that they have knowledge of self yet until they reveal it to you. Or, you know, typically that's how it goes. You know, usually people with knowledge of self will reveal that they have knowledge of self in their dealings with everyday people. And so for me, that takes me back to the desert, because I'm originally from Medina. A lot of people don't know that. I'm from East New York.
Right.
But my family, I always had family in the desert, even though I'm from Queens. Right. See what I'm saying? So I spent a lot of my summers in Queens, Jamaica, Queens in particular, right? My grandmother lived in Jamaica, Queens, and my uncles, aunts lived in Jamaica, Queens, and Hollis. So it wasn't until I went to Queens that I met a 5%er who would later on become the person to pass me on supreme mathematics, supreme alphabets, and that's Ron Dewar, Rosedale, Queens. You know what I'm saying? My family, my mother eventually moved to Rosedale, moved to Queens, left Brooklyn because she had enough of that. And you know how it goes. You know, your parents move, you move with them. And so that's how it is, especially when you have knowledge of self. A lot of people from Queens that had knowledge of self was from other boroughs as well, you know? And so that's how the knowledge was able to travel with the people as they migrated and moved to different boroughs, you know? And so as a child, a lot of my summers were spent in the parks, you know, hanging out with friends and stuff like that. And one particular summer day in 1995, I'm in Brookville Park in Queens, And I'm talking to a brother named Ron Dualaw. This brother's very deep, very knowledgeable, and to me as a teenager, it was very impressionable because I always had a curious mind, and he would tell me things like, did you know that you could walk on water, and stuff like that, and I'm just like, what is this guy talking about,
Right.
But when he broke it all down, it all made sense. Although he came indirect with it, he sparked my imagination. And that triggered my intrigue with knowledge in general and the thirst to want to know more. And that was the kind of kid I was. That was the kind of child I was. Even though I was in the streets, I was curious, and it didn't take much to ignite my curiosity. And that's what the knowledge of self did as he presented it to me. And he would go on to give me supreme mathematics and alphabets. And, at that time, they didn't even have definitions for them. These days, a lot of times people might find supreme mathematics or alphabets online, and they will come equipped with definitions.
Right,
but when we got them, when I got them, I didn't get the
which I hate though.
Right,
yeah,
I didn't get the definitions till much later on, and he told me that I was responsible to define them myself.
And by the way, when I said I hate them, that's why, because we're supposed to find the answers to ourselves,
right.
And develop our understanding and be checked by that person that's teaching us.
Right. And so and that kind of segues perfectly into the other part of my childhood, right? Although I was still running around in the streets, now that I had a degree of some type of knowledge, that gave me the ability to meet other people, peers my age. And so I would meet up with guards from like Jamaica High School, Hillcrest High School, and in the desert, these are very famous places, famous high schools, because a lot of guards historically come out of these high schools. And so, everybody knows that when school lets out, high school lets out in Queens, most teenagers go to Jamaica Avenue. And so that's where I would go and meet up different brothers with knowledge of self. And when we met each other, that's when we would start engaging in these intellectual, discussions about the lessons. And then, I remember, I'll never forget, Ron Du brought me to my first civilization class in Oasis in Queens, on Jamaica Avenue, 176th Street, the African Poetry Theater. And that's where it all started for me. That's when I got a chance to meet a lot of other brothers like Father Bouchon and Sia Law out of Medina, and Allah Relativity, and a host of other brothers, Life Allah. A lot of these brothers were the pioneers and established a lot of things out there in the Oasis and kept the teachings going.
Absolutely.
So
now as the journey continues, as you have this knowledge of self, you do hit a pitfall. Tell us about that.
Well, again, I was in the streets. So when you in the streets, know what comes with that, right? If you're gonna be out in the streets, know at some point, part of the game is that you get locked up. You do serve time. You end up serving time, especially if you knee deep in it, and you're not just like outside and back in, and you're not really out there taking risks. I was one of those risk takers out there. I was one of those people that was a go-getter. And so while I was out there getting it, or at least trying to get it, you get caught up and you catch cases, and then when you catch those cases and you get incarcerated, now you find yourself in a cipher, in a predicament, in whether it be Rikers Island or upstate New York. Most of the time I spent was upstate New York. Right, so I've traveled to a lot of these different spots. Anybody that's served time in New York know that other states do the same thing, but they shift you around. You know what I'm saying? They move you around from facility to facility, and so you start to meet a lot of different people from a lot of different boroughs, a lot of different towns outside of New York City. That created a space for a lot of us that were already exposed to the teachings to build in prison. And so we start meeting gods from so many different places. And what that did was that caused us to create sort of like a network, so to speak, in the sense that now different people from different places are able to have discussions on the same lessons. Right? And so that allowed us to keep each other sharp. And it got to a point where, like, for example, I was serving a lot of time. Like, I got sentenced to 10 years. So with that amount of time, some people don't have the time to really work on themselves, right? And so one of the things that I did was I used the time that I was doing to work on myself, right? To really dig deeper into the lessons and use the lessons as a framework to transform myself as an individual. Started to look at the morals and the ethics, the values, the principles that the lessons were conveying, not on their face, not on the surface, but in between the lines, right? What are the lessons saying to us as young people? Can I read in between the lines, and can you dissect what's being said in a particular lesson? And so when you're serving time, it allows you a space and the time to really dig into it and get philosophical with it. Whereas if you're out in society, a lot of people don't have that opportunity. People have to really be disciplined on the outside to manage their time in a way where they're able to read and meditate on these lessons. And it really takes a sincere degree of a seriousness, to be able to draw from the lessons what's being conveyed. And so being incarcerated allowed me that time, though. So while some people might look at somebody who's incarcerated and frown upon it, like this person did something terrible, but the interesting thing about being incarcerated is that it allows you the time and the space to work on yourself and to hopefully return to society a better individual than you were when you went in. And that was the case for me.
That's definitely peace, God. And you see, there's more. I also want to ask you about the obstacles that you had, though, because it wasn't just like you were just, okay, I want to get this knowledge really well, get a true understanding of all this, and they'll let me.
Right.
There are a lot of obstacles, and you become one of the key figures that help, set a standard, by the courts of how how the guards in prison can actually learn this. You know what I mean? Speak briefly about that.
Definitely. So one of the dynamics in prison is that it's a different world, obviously, right, from the world that we know on the outside. It's more regulated. There's more rules, and so one of the rules that they applied to us as 5%ers in there was they mischaracterized us, for one, as a security threat group, right? They labeled us a gang, and so everybody knows, general knowledge, that 5%ers are not a gang, right? We have a 501c3, we have a newspaper, we have public relations, we are out in the community doing positive things, and so we just didn't fit that label, that the characteristic of a gang in no shape, way, or form. And so we had to go through various litigation. People before me filed lawsuits, and that really just served as a basis for me to really start looking into this. So I took a legal research course in there, educated myself about the language of the law, understood the principles, and studied how the law was applied. And when I realized that the law was being applied to us in the wrong way, that raised the eyebrow, and that made me start to focus my research on how to litigate this case for the nation. And one of the things that was problematic inside was that the prison officials, they have a job to do, and it's nothing personal, against prison officials. They come in, they do their time, and they do their 8 hours and go home back to their family and so forth, and life goes on for them. But for those of us who are inside trying to work on ourselves, and especially like for me personally, a person trying to use these teachings as a basis to transform himself and rehabilitate himself, and to be told that you can't practice your culture, your beliefs without a court order. And it was baffling to me because a few years prior, now this is about 2007, 2008, but 5 years prior, a brother by the name of Intelligent Tarifa Law had a landmark decision in the district court for the Southern District of New York, that's federal court, that granted us the right, the First Amendment right, to believe in what we believe in. And that's historic, that's huge. But what I found was that although we had that First Amendment right, we had that recognition that we are not a gang, and that we had the right, just as anyone else, to practice our culture or faith or belief, whatever you want to call it, according to our consciousness. Yet other people are allowed to practice, they're allowed to have their scriptures, they're allowed to have pendants, they're allowed to have their head garments, they're allowed to have certain books come in from the outside and even have outside visitors come in. I thought that there was something wrong with that because we weren't granted the same liberties. We weren't granted the same opportunities to have those things to support this transformation that we're trying to do. And if anyone takes, a moment to just go over the lessons and see the principles that the lessons convey, they'll see that this is something very positive and empowering, and it has the power and ability to change someone's life. And so this is something that I had to explain to the court. You see what I'm saying? This is something that I had to show the court through a petition that although we are granted First Amendment protection, we are still not allowed to practice our way of life in prison, which is not disruptive to the order of the prison or the maintenance of the daily maintenance of the prison, right? To accommodate us would not be much, and it would not cost the prisons much money. So there was no fiscal issue. There was no, there was no reason not to allow us to practice. And so I had to break this down and explain to the courts, the situation. And so through my petition, I raised a claim that not only are we still being denied our First Amendment right to practice and see God as we see God, but we are also being denied equal justice. We are still being denied equal protection under the law, which is a violation of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, right? So this amendment to the Constitution says that, you can't treat one group one way. And a lot of people may know this already and be familiar with this from the famous case Brown versus Board of Education. This is what Thurgood Marshall was able to illustrate to the United States Supreme Court. Now, you can't treat one group of people one way and treat another group of people in a totally different way under the same laws. There has to be equal protection of the law. So, and then not only that, but it was a violation of federal law because the prisons in New York were getting money being funded partially by the federal government. Well, the federal government has a law that says that if you're getting money from the federal government, you cannot deny constitutional rights to those people that you are in charge of, being in charge of in terms of their person. So you're violating our rights, and then you're telling me that I can't practice this way of life without a court order. And so that's what triggered the lawsuit, right? So if I don't have a court order, then I'm going to go out and get one.
Right.
And so, and a lot of things led up to that. That wasn't just me. There was a lot of guards in the penal cipher or who incarcerated in the prisons who at one time they were able to wear the universal flag, for example. They were able to have lessons. They had subscriptions to the 5% newspaper. But when this decision arbitrarily came from the prison officials, they started to take away brothers' newspapers, their lessons. They started to confiscate their universal flags and calling them contraband. And so that's what triggered all of these different lawsuits that just kept adding up. Understood. When it came time for me to do it, I already had the right idea in terms of the motivation and
the template
and to explain, and from a legal standpoint, what's wrong with the picture here,
right,
and being able to point out that elephant.
And that certainly led to another success, because you never know if we have to do this again.
Indeed, yep.
But
many in Massachusetts and Virginia.
I bring this up because all this is happening, all this you're learning, all this you're doing, and I want to fast forward to the beginnings of this Righteous Way book trilogy.
Right.
So I think it's about 2000, maybe 11. And I
can take you back a little further.
You know what I mean?
But yeah, that's about right.
When we meet,
definitely.
And I just want to give them a picture of what I saw, and then you go back to how that picture came about. God's telling me he wants to write a book. He knows that I edit, and he shows me a giant folder of all these loose papers. And I said, listen, I'm a good editor, but I ain't typing that shit up. Yo, it was crazy. Yep. It was crazy. Yep. It was like the lost manuscripts. It was it was wild. And when you started to go through it, there was such a logic to the way you were moving. You knew where everything was, and it was just, some papers looked like the Constitution, others looked fresh.
Very old, yep.
Yeah, so it was crazy. So you had yellow papers, white papers, all types of stuff, legal pad paper, everything in there. And the exuberance, the excitement, the passion that you spoke about, I was like, God, if you get this together and if you actually type up, I'm with you. And everything I said that would be the next step, you came back with the next step. So what led you to start to write this book? Because the first thing that somebody that might be familiar with the nation or just be a straight hater or just don't understand how books are made or anything, what led you to say, look, I'm in the nation, why don't I write a book? You know what I mean? Why are you locked up? You must have been thinking like, yo, there must be so many things I'm missing. Getting a cosign, being with one of the elders out there, right? All of these reasons that could be like negatives to not write this.
Right.
But you just kept writing and then thought of how to write it. Like, how did this idea of this first Righteous Way book come about?
So, just to give you a little background, I could take you back to 2006, 2007. And although I was still incarcerated, I was in very much contact with a lot of gods in the Free Cipher, out in the world, out in society. Thanks to them and their degree of righteousness, they continue to communicate with me, and that's very important too when you have people on the outside that are communicating with their families on the inside, because letters go a long way. Letters might not be, they may be taken for granted today in 2021, but a letter, whether it's handwritten or typed, but a personal letter to somebody is a very powerful thing, and that enabled me to communicate back and forth with brothers like Allah B. I was in contact with Born King Allah, who's now in Now C, right, North Carolina. I was in contact with Born Justice. I was in contact with Master Shamar. I was in contact with,
who writes a million letters,
exactly, and so Wise Jamel, what I'm saying, rest in power. So many people.
Remember the perfection.
Wise Born Black, Born Black, Allah Shah. I met Allah Shah later.
That's why I asked though, because a lot of people think you just wrote this in prison.
Just came out of nowhere.
You don't know anybody, but the connections were there because a lot of people don't know that. Like when we were getting the knowledge, a person like me that is a writer, it was almost mandatory that I have to just pick up random letters that are to the school and have no specific address, particular, in care of, and write back to that person.
Right.
So that became part of the assignment, and that was part of the assignment. So, there was definitely a connection between you and the nation.
Yeah.
Not just inside jail, but outside of it as well. But when you wrote the book, what was the original idea for The Righteous Way?
So let me just say, around that time period, and I'm sure you'll be able to relate to this, a lot of books were coming out. In fact, there was Elijah Jihad's book, Immortal Birth. Powerful book, powerful.
I edited that one too.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah, resume crazy.
Peace to the God.
Resume crazy. Peace to Elijah Jihad. Resume, but God, so thankfully in there we were able to purchase books from brothers, so I purchased, by the way, the God Minister Justice at the time had a bookstore in Albany, and I would buy books from his bookstore. He would mail them to me. So I was staying in tune with a lot of different books. I'm an avid reader, so and you'll see the connection, right, between me doing all this reading and me coming up with the idea of becoming an author myself. So I started to just devour so many books, God, that deal with the mental, psychology, emotional intelligence, consciousness, ethics, morals, philosophy, history, science, mathematics. So I'm hitting all these subjects and I'm just reading and devouring all this stuff, acquiring all this knowledge, and not only that, but keeping journals. I kept journals, and that was the seed. I didn't know it then.
Right.
I didn't know that me keeping journals would become the seed to become the righteous way, but I kept journals, and I would read and take so many notes that I had to buy another book because I ran out of pages. So I bought 2 more books and filled those up with notes, and I just kept going. Then I get a hold of Immortal Birth, and I'm like, oh, the God got the flag on the book, yo.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Immortal Birth.
Right.
And so, I go through it.
Which, by the way, is his journey, a very distinct book, his journey through many of the different schools of thought, and how he ended up being a 5%.
Right.
So a very intriguing
from a first
comparative study. It's literally a comparative study.
Yeah, and it's firsthand. Like, he went through
Right, yeah.
That's
he
his
went
personal
through
experience.
That. So when he says he went through the Nawabians and the crazy things that they did, he wasn't hearing rumors and gossip. He was there,
And I like how he was able to go through them in like sort of chronological order and show all these different ciphers that he'd been through and what he learned. I think that was the key for me. Is not he's just not talking about these entities from an objective point of view. Like, it's personal for him.
Right.
And I like the way he did that. That was inspirational for me. Is that he made it personal.
That was the difficulty in the book, because it was a firsthand.
Right.
And the proving stuff that was anecdotal, and how do you breach the two, what I mean?
Right.
But please,
So I got a hold of that book, God. I devoured it, and it was just a total inspiration. Then I get my hands on a whole nother book called Knowledge of Self, Anthology.
Right.
And this book got the man out with the flame burning inside, and I'm like, yo, the gods are out here going crazy. The gods must have gone crazy. That
that was a big book. Yeah,
God.
Definitely.
And then
I co-edited that one too.
Yes, God, yes. The resume is crazy. I'm trying to tell people they don't understand. Yo, the God's resume is crazy.
Piece of Supreme Understanding and
Indeed.
See Best A-Life. They were the co-editors. Supreme was the lead editor, and put that book together along with so many others.
Indeed.
But that was a monumental book, collection of all the gods, and it's all over the world.
And these 2 books, God, that's it. Those 2 books became the thing that ignited.
Well, while so many people saw those books as enough, what did you see?
Wow.
Because something was missing, and you filled the void.
Well, here's the thing, right? So I thought that, in all fairness, with Immortal Birth, I got hyped when I got to, I think, chapter 5. Because that's the chapter where he starts to go in about the gods and earths. That's the nation. That's the NGE chapter. That's the 5%. And he goes through these things, and I'm like, okay, I'm reading through all of these said nations, and now here we come to the nation that I'm a part of. And I start to see how he goes through it, and I'm like, wow, the God really did his thing with this piece. But then I thought to myself, what if there was a book where all the chapters had to do with the nation of gods and earths? Specifically, what we teach, how do I personally apply it, how do I see it, and maybe if I share with people how I see things, maybe it could ignite something in them or help them see something from a different perspective, or sort of trigger them to be a little more analytical about the lessons, or look at it, this way and go, oh wow, I never thought about that. Let me, And so it's about opening the mind. Right, opening people's mind, and that's how my mind was open, by reading different people's perspectives. Right, that's how you get that 360. Right. And so same thing with Knowledge of Self. Right, I have all these different perspectives, and I'm like, oh man, yo, the gods and the earths are putting it down, and I'm so inspired. I'm gonna write a book too, but I don't know what it's gonna be called yet. But I know I'm gonna write a book. I don't know the name of it. At that time, I had no idea what the name of the title was gonna be. I wasn't even worried about the title at that point. I was just like, let me get my story together. Let me refine my voice, my author's voice. Let me, how am I going to tell my story? And that's something that you have to kind of learn. You get better with practice. Because at first I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I mean, I knew I wanted to write, but when you write from a narrative that you're talking about your story and how something affected you and how something impacted you, you want to be able to tell it in a compelling way. But still that it, in a way that's intellectually honest, right? Something that's sincere. And something that you take serious, and hopefully when people read it, they'll see, okay, yeah, this person is taking this thing serious by how I see how he's applying what he's learning. And so that's what I got from these books. And so I started to look at all of these notes, in my journal, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to start picking some topics because I'm all over the place, and some people might even get that when they look at my books now, like, damn, the God is all over the place. But there is a method to what I do. In everything I do, there's a method. Some folks might not catch it, but you might have to go back and check it out. And depending on, if a person is keen enough and they're really reading this thing and not just like skimming the surface, they'll see the connections that I'm making. I wanted to be able to not put out a book like some that I've read that was just commentary on like the culture, but is written by people that are not part of the culture. I wanted to do something that was written by those who are part of the culture, who are making the teachings walk and talk. And that's what gave birth to the idea that I'm going to get Gods and Earths on this project. I'm not going to go and get an outside editor. The editor must be a 5%er. And so, and that's how to your door I came knocking. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then the idea started to grow, right? I wanted to get other perspectives from other gods from different places. Our nation has grown so wide, so far-reaching. The teachings that...
But unlike the Knowledge of Self book, it doesn't overpower the book. It's still led by you dominantly, but it's also having people write about specific issues to illuminate ideas that you're already presenting.
Right.
So they all become supplemental.
Right.
And what happens is the righteous way becomes the perfect primer to anyone that's curious about this nation. And anyone that's in the nation, to make sure that you better know the stuff that's in there. You know what I mean? Because if you don't, and I never deterred you from all of the different subjects, because the teaching style that I was using is very much steeped in that. We're supposed to be Renaissance men because we're the true and living God.
Right.
And we go tell somebody that we're God, they'd be like, well, instead of, after they get the past of making us fly and walk through walls, they're going to ask us about things.
Right.
What is that? What is this about? And we're supposed to know about things.
That's right.
And have insights of where things are.
Right.
And the first two Righteous Way books, right?
Right.
You do the first Righteous Way book, it becomes the perfect primer. Real quickly, because I want to spend a lot of time on the Infinity Edition.
Got you.
What was the initial add-on that makes the 50th, the 50th anniversary Jubilee edition unique?
So that goes right into the heart of our 50th year anniversary. That's why that
right.
50 on there, the power of the cipher.
Right.
I was in Harlem that weekend when the nation was celebrating its 50th year anniversary, and the Builders Build group, Born King of Law and others, contributed in a major way to make the Apollo happen.
Right.
And that was a historic moment for this nation. And so that inspired the Golden Jubilee edition, because that's what Golden Jubilee means. It's a 50th year anniversary. And that's why I called it the Golden Jubilee. And what that book does is it picks up where part one leaves off. It continues the story, because the story doesn't end at the last page of part one. And I wanted to keep it going. Also because of the positive feedback. It was so overwhelming that it just made sense to do a part two. And the timing was perfect. And I said, you know what? Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And I got with a host of brothers and sisters and put this put this thing out there. And what's unique about part 2 that I haven't found in any other book other than maybe Knowledge of Self is the female voice.
Right.
The female voice is there.
On all types of topics, all types of issues.
Right.
Absolutely. And now we get to the new book that makes it part of this beautiful trilogy set that you can get them all. It looks, the cover is almost as brilliant as the actual contents of the book. And I'm saying this because I lived with these books.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Working on these books. And when we did the third one, you came to me and said you're doing the Infinity Edition. You had all your ideas set out. And my main job was to make sure that nothing was redundant.
Yes.
Nothing was repeated, and that there's no damn mistakes in the book.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And I think, Star Mel, and I said, I've been wanting to say this to you, and I want to say it on the air. Mm-hmm. I think this is where you really become an incredible author, is in this book. Because the way you captured your voice, the way you have unique understanding, I cannot find anywhere else. And we worked a lot on all the books, on the transitions between chapter to chapter.
Right.
And this one was just more seamless than all the others. You know what I mean? And naming it the Infinity Edition. And when you came to me, you said this was definitely the last of the trilogy. It is the Infinity Edition. I want to read the description that is put out on websites, Barnes and Nobles. It says, in the Righteous Way Infinity Edition, author Star Mel Allah aims to empower readers by showing them how to tap into their infinite potential. Here, Star Mel delves further into the knowledge of self by discussing the limitations and powers of the mind. He provides a basic framework for readers to take charge of their destiny by finding their purpose and becoming their own master. The Infinity Edition was edited by me, author of the Filter Real, educator. Anyway, it features a compelling foreword by Elam Jad, Born Allah, one of the founding editors of the 5% Nation's first newspaper, The Word, an exclusive interview by hip-hop journalist Ime Ekpo, Queen I Wisdom Earth, and the legendary Big Daddy Kane about his experience as a member of the 5% Nation. The Infinity Edition also features interviews with mental health and substance abuse specialist Allah Shah, longtime Nation representative Lauren Board Justice Allah, and successful entrepreneur Knowledge Infinite Allah. Moreover, this book includes photos by renowned photographers Jamel Shabazz and Khalik Allah, and features essays by martial arts expert Infinite Mind Allah and Saladin Kwana Allah, founder of the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. Man, that's you don't buy it off that though. I don't know what you're gonna do. You know what I mean? And let me tell you something. The stuff that when this time around we asked people for essays. They didn't write. They wrote their best stuff. They was like, oh, this is. Infinite Mind wrote something powerful. Saladin. Saladin's one of the great writers in our nation.
Indeed.
Though. He's a legend.
Indeed. Yep.
And he just pulled that out the hat. It was just incredible stuff here.
Yeah.
And then, legendary. You have a legendary photographer from back then, and you have a new legend in Khalik Allah.
That's right.
Jamel and Khalik, legends.
Yep.
It's an incredible book. That's why I said it looks beautiful inside. It's deep. And all you need with this book is a highlighter, because you're gonna need that.
Yep, definitely.
You're gonna need that.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? Unless you get the digital version, you can highlight stuff. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yep.
But tell me your thought process on some of these chapters, because they're riveting. I literally was reading this though and saying, man, he put that together the right way. That's the way I would remember it. I probably would make PDFs of portions, and there'll be lessons for the students.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And it's just. Tell me how you made this though.
Well, okay, so I wanted to start off right with going into the mind. It's difficult to go into any other subject when dealing with the knowledge of self without first dealing with the mind. This is what we teach. Today's supreme mathematics is knowledge. Knowledge is gained through the mind, through observation, right? Through awareness, through consciousness, through alertness with one's surroundings and one's being. So when I thought about how I'm going to structure this book, I wanted to give readers an experience, not just write a book, but the book itself has to be an experience. And so that experience had to start with engaging people's minds. And it's hard to get people to grasp concepts like self-empowerment and knowledge of self and the importance of these concepts if they can't wrap their mind around it. So I wanted to be able to start there and filter it out and work my way towards the body or the physical, the environment, how our environment impacts us, right? But if our minds aren't right, then our environment can have a harmful impact on us as individuals. Mm-hmm. So before I even got to the chapter to deal with the environment or what I call outside of you, I wanted to deal with inside of you. What's going on in the world inside you as an individual, as a person, apart from the world. Some people might call it individualism. The cohesiveness of the individual with the outside world and the people in society is the collectivism, right? The engagement with society and one's community is the collectivism. But let's go from individual to collective, because if the individual isn't right, how can they come out into the community and in society and be right and apply these teachings the right way? So this is what informed me in terms of how I'm going to structure this thing, to go from the mind to the environment and to start to address the things that are happening around us that we see every day in our environment, whether it's on the news, on social media, with family, or in the community, in the streets. I wanted to bring this in a way where it's like street knowledge, but yet intellectually engaging. So it's in some ways hood and straightforward, but in other ways it's intellectual. It will engage your imagination, and that's what I wanted to do, is show people that there is no limit. Some people used to say skies is the limit, but really there is no limit. And the only limitations that exist are those that we believe. I'm going to say that again. The only limitations that exist are those we believe. And that's why this book is called the Infinity Edition, because there is no limit. And this has no beginning nor ending. And what I'm doing here is passing on jewels that other people will be able to pass on to others. And this thing keeps going forever. And that's how the teachings remain forever. And that's how they are everlasting. And that's how some people thought that they would kill these teachings by killing or assassinating Allah. But all that did was ignite a flame in others to keep the teachings going. And the Father said, if you keep teaching, how can I die? So if people have love for the Father, if people have love for Allah, keep teaching as he taught it. And the way he taught it was, he taught it to young people first, and he was able to tap into their imagination. He was able to tap into their mind with supreme mathematics and alphabets. Because, that book came out, the true history, right, of Allah and his 5%, written by those who were there.
Right.
And I got to give a shout out.
One of the excellent books,
to the elders, man. I got to give a supreme shout out to all the elders and all our big brothers and sisters, man, who put this book together, because that was laborious. And, to put together a serious book like that. And now I'm sure I speak for a lot of people when I say that many of us have waited so long to have a book like that. And I'm so thankful that the elders took the time out to put it together and to get their stories out there, because their stories were like, seeing that book was like in a lot of ways like the video when the video first came out. And people saw Allah, because when that book came out, I was like, finally, we get to hear the story by those who walked it and talked it and lived it in that time period.
That's right.
And when it's not a third party thing, it's from the narrative of those who lived it.
First person narratives, yeah.
And I appreciated that so much. It was so empowering, because in those stories you get more. See, in those stories you see our culture unfold. you see our culture bloom into what it is today. And I'm so thankful for that, because that serves as not only inspiration and motivation, but a foundation for people to step on that and be firmly rooted in the teachings, because it's being told by those who actually lived it. And that's powerful. That's serious, because there's a lot of sources out there that claim to be, and they're telling the story wrong.
That's right. That's right.
And so this is a narrative, this is a story, this is a culture and a way of life that's deserving of those who live it to tell it like it is. And so bringing us back, tying that back in, as I see all of these books come out, as I see Gods and Earths building in so many different ways and doing new things, we see the build taking place. And I use the word build on purpose, because that is symbolized by the number 8 in our supreme mathematics. And when you turn that number 8 on its side, you have the infinity symbol. And I wanted to explain that in the book, because that's what we do. And when you look at the number 8, if you were in a car and you were driving in that same pattern, you would be zigzag zigging. And when you look at zigzag zig, that's the 26th letter of the alphabet. When you're born 2 and 6, you got what? 8. Infinity all over again. In other words, no beginning, nor ending. And that was the whole thing, is that it's never too late for people to empower themselves. It's never too late for people to level up. It's never too late for people to turn their life around and do what they want to do, as long as they have sincerity and dedication, commitment to living that out. No one's expecting you to be perfect, and you don't have to be great to start, but you got to you got to start to be great. And that's a fact. You got to start to be great. And that's what it was with me, with the beginning, with the writing of these books. I didn't set out to be great. It just turned out that way because of my dedication, the sincerity, and the art that I put into it. I also used to do graffiti back in the days. That's part of my childhood too. And I forgot to mention that. And I'll be remiss to add that, because I always been an artistic type person, but my art work was in a different way. I started out doing portraits, and then, once I got in tune with graffiti, I started going to the stores and getting the Krylon cans and the Rust-Oleum spray paints and doing murals. And so I was able, through that process, being able to appreciate detail and colors and the power of color. And that goes back to the front cover of the Infinity Edition, because I looked at the role of color in our universe and how we see color and how color impacts the psyche. It impacts the mind. And colors have vibrations, whether people realize it or not. Sound has vibration. Everything in the universe has vibration and motion. So I wanted to come up with a concept that would convey these different colors. And so I thought about the nebula. I thought about, and my name being Star Mel, I'm definitely in tune with the universe and the vibration of the universe and the elements of the universe, and everything in the universe exists within us. And I tell people all the time, when you study the universe, you're only studying yourself. And when you study yourself, you only study in the universe. Same thing for those who are out there looking for God. You don't have to look for God in the sky. All you got to do is look in the mirror. When you look for God within yourself, you will find God. And every scripture that's out there supports that.
The first 2 Righteous Way books are perfect primers for people trying to learn about this nation. For the average person that's outside of the nation or curious, what would be their need for the Infinity Edition? Like, how would that fit in?
Well, if they're outside the nation, the Infinity Edition will, if they're looking for, it depends on what they're looking for. Let me start with that, right? Because people, different people looking for different things, and different people are at different levels and stages in their lives. So depending on what they're going through at the time, for example, if there are people out there who are looking for a basis to empower themselves, they can find that in the Infinity Edition, and they don't necessarily have to become a 5%er to get that from the book.
Right.
The book is not written in code or special language that only 5%ers can understand. I made sure to pay attention to my writing so that anyone can read the book and gain so much from it. If you're a person that's just intellectually curious and you like to know stuff, you gain so much out of the Infinity Edition or any one of the 3 books. If you are somebody who was just introduced to the culture or to the teachings and you're a newborn or you're a neophyte or someone new in the teachings, and let's say you just started studying this thing and it hasn't even been 90 days yet or it hasn't been 6 months, you can read any one of these books and gain so much insight from them. Again, especially in the Infinity Edition, right? You can go into the Infinity Edition and find where I explain how certain lessons are applied to certain situations that will help give you understanding about those situations. If you are a hip hop fan and you are not a 5%er, and that's okay. You doing you a lover of hip hop, check out part 3, check out the Infinity Edition. All 3 books have chapters dedicated to hip hop.
That's right.
But in particular, part 3 has a historic, powerful interview where Queen Eye Wisdom interviews Big Daddy Kane in this book. And Big Daddy Kane, for those who don't know, is legend. Look him up.
With questions he's never answered.
Exactly.
And never been asked.
Right.
You know, it's not only that he's never answered them, he's never been asked about the details of how he got this knowledge.
Right.
No one had the rapport to ask those questions, you know, and you got that in there.
Yep.
Oh man, they can get this book at the Righteous Way Book, all spelled correctly, .com. Star Mel, you're on social media as Star Mel Allah on the IG.
Facebook.
This is incredible work, man. It's a classic. I'm so honored to have been part of such a great series of books. You know what I mean? That I get to say that. I do like saying that, though. You know, I had a little hand in that. You know what I mean?
It's an honor, God. That book wouldn't have been. Let me just say this real quick, God. Not to cut you off, but God, I mean, I'm thankful to had the opportunity to not only meet you, but to be able to work with you. And I think that's key with the things that a lot of 5%ers are trying to do out there today. I see a lot of people on their grind, and salute to them. Right. You know, brothers and sisters are out there. They're creatives. They're doing wonderful things. They're entrepreneurs. They're doing so many wonderful things. Don't be afraid to work with other gods and earths who are true and living.
That's right.
To help take your build to the next level. We're supposed to learn to work together.
That's right.
And no man or woman is an island unto themselves.
That's right. I appreciate that. Again, it's the righteouswaybook.com. The author is Star Mel Allah. Contact him. Let him know what you think about the book. Go to the website. The website is beautiful. It lays everything out. There's a lot of things to get in there. A lot of merch. A lot of nice stuff to get there along with the book. And this box set looks incredible. You know what I mean?
Indeed.
And just great stuff. And this is a book that people will be reading for years and years and years. Its reread value is enormous. And it's a cornerstone of libraries. You know what I mean? It's a cornerstone of libraries. You know, so as we end, want to give a quick shout out to Napoleon the Legend. Happy born day, my brother. And if you heard our intro music, that was by my brother Kevlar 7, Remembered in Perfection. My brother Kevlar 7 out of the Wiseman. For those that don't know, that's Bronze Dancer's brother, one of my great friends. He gave me that beat a long time ago to do a show. And so I said, let me use it, you know. When
that beat is hard.
My producer asked, you know, and only my other brother, Willie Ways, used it for a song called Better Man. So it's a great track. And peace to my brother, Willie Ways. We got some work coming. So with that said, go to the righteouswaybook.com, get this book, contact the brother, ask him questions, detail him. And if you want that knowledge, man, come get it. We're giving it to you. You know what I mean?
That's right.
You come in,
jewels.
You come get it, and you earn it. So until next time, there'll be a lot more stories to tell, writings to recite, and records to rewind and reminisce. I'm your host, Sunez Allah. And as always, the Power Right Show is a never respect fake broadcast. Peace.
Peace.